It's go time.
Welcome to Quick Kicks here on Third Down Gamble with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham.
It seems like every week in the CFL, the injury reports are probably the first place we go to after game stats. We look down what the CFL has posted, and my goodness, we're still looking at a roll of people that are injured and may not be available. And what they call the curse in Winnipeg, and you brought it up, Nathan Rourke doesn't beat the Blue Bombers. He is 0-4, 7 now?
Well, 0 for 4 in the regular season, 0-1 in the playoffs. There was 2 other games in which he participated that were also losses. So that's getting to be a pretty large sample size of games against the Bombers that the Lions with Rourke have underperformed.
Whenever you get that sort of stat running against you, it hurts. But what hurts more is when you injure your oblique. And that's exactly what happened to Rourke during that football game. Now, the play that it showed, I don't think that was the play that it actually happened. I'm looking at the play just before where he was kind of trying to break through the pocket, was collapsing. And he got twisted and he still tried to throw a football. And I think that's where probably that happened.
I agree with you. One thing that I really saw in that game against the Bombers is Nathan Rourke is hard to bring down, but that can be a bit of a detriment as well because we saw probably the injury occur fighting off of a tackle. There was a couple other plays as well where he was fighting. It looked like Willie Jefferson had him for a loss at one point. He kind of scattered away and threw the ball away, but came up limping in that one as well. So a couple of spots where, and maybe it's a bit of an experience thing for Nathan Rourke. He has to learn when to take the hit, protect the ball, and when to throw it away. And this is a situation where he was trying to fight through it. And unfortunately, it looks like he has suffered an injury that may sideline him here for a little bit.
It's hard to know right now. We're sort of wading through this. He was at practice in British Columbia, of course, recording on a Tuesday. But this afternoon he was at BC Lions practice. So that is a positive sign. But will he have that full mobility and will he have that trust? And that's the two aspects that you have to worry about. Drew Brown, another one with the Ottawa Redblacks. Now he picked up that injury to his hip when Jameer Thurman came through on a blitz and he ducked him and looked like to me that just the trail leg of Jameer Thurman caught him in the hip and kind of made a contusion sort of effect out of it. But it may have been more than that. Maybe the twist from Brown caused a little bit of the damage. He is still being limited at practice. And we saw what happened with the backup that they used against the Alouettes.
We did. And despite what Elks GM Ed Hervey says, I think there's some superstar players that are down early this season. We also have Reggie Bagleton of the Calgary Stampeders on that list. That one looks like it could be serious, possible knee injury. Brady Oliveira of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, first drive of the game, he rips off 43 yards and then goes down injured. Looks like a possible shoulder with Brady Oliveira. The good news is he was at practice the last 2 days running, and today he was seen actually catching some balls and throwing a little bit as well. I would not be surprised to see him out this week in the return match against the BC Lions, but I don't expect it to be long-term with Brady Oliveira.
And in true Mike O'Shea style, he was absolutely non-committal on anything with respect to that injury. He just said, I'm a positive person. I look at the positive side of what could be happening to him, and I just don't buy that. I like the fact that he is, and he likes to play it that way. But seriously, he is just hedging everything and keeping it close. And you're never going to get it out of him. So I don't know sometimes why people bother, because it's just not who he is as a coach. It's not his style.
It's not. And if we go through this list of injuries, I think it's important to remember as well, we're only through 2 weeks of the season. There's a lot of games ahead of these teams, and you want to protect players and not rush them back this early in the season because you want them healthy down the stretch and into the playoffs. As I said, Nathan Rourke, questionable this week. Brady Oliveira, questionable. Drew Brown might be back in. We see the Toronto Argonauts Chad Kelly, not quite ready to go yet either. They want to make sure he is 100% mobile before he gets back in after his broken leg. I think there's a lot of caution in these situations, and you want to make sure that you've got guys in those late season and those important playoff games.
It was almost immediate to the loss that the Argonauts suffered to the Calgary Stampeders that Ryan Dinwiddie, their head coach, was asked, well, is this now the time to bring back Chad Kelly? And he was very certain that, look, this guy has got to be ready. He's got to be healthy, and we can't risk further injury. He was adamant that this matters more. Does he still believe in Nick Arbuckle? Most likely, but Arbuckle has got to show more, and we'll get into that. Chad Kelly being out, another one of these big stars in the league that isn't playing. And, of course, Zach Collaros is getting his first start. When most pro leagues are trying to drive themselves with star power, when they're not there, it makes it tough.
It does, and I think I can defend Coach Dinwiddie a little bit here. They're still in a three-way tie for second in the East Division right now. So other than the Montreal Alouettes rolling off 2 wins in a row, it's not like they're sliding down the standings and the Argonauts have to worry about things yet. I think they can be patient. They know what Chad Kelly brings to the table when he is able to play and he is in those games. And right now they can be a little bit patient.
To a point they can. It's a weird stat anomaly that has been brought forward, and that is that the Ontario teams are winless. They're 0-6 overall. Quebec 2-0, BC is 1-1, and you've got a split in Alberta with a 2-1 record, and Saskatchewan, of course, undefeated at 2-0, and the Bombers at 1-0. So the rest of Canada is 8-2. Ontario was 0-6. Nobody would have thought that.
One thing that's great about being a CFL fan is at any point you can jump in with small sample sizes and gross overreactions. And I think we're in that situation right now. There's a lot of doom and gloom about those 3 East Division teams in Ontario being over at this point in the season. The Calgary Stampeders are a surprising undefeated team as well. But again, you're looking at such a small sample size that can you really read too much into it? A lot of teams were still getting new players up to speed, getting the rust off and working on finding their regular season game legs over these first couple of weeks. So I don't know if anybody can be in panic mode yet or if anybody should be planning their Grey Cup celebrations.
We've seen teams with 2-0 starts wind up with 4-14 records. And if you're the Ottawa Redblacks in their fan club, you know what I'm talking about. It is this panic that you talk about. There is no real reason to panic. When you're the East and none of your teams have won at home, none of them have won on the road, it really starts to add up. And Hamilton, I think, of the bunch is probably the least concerned. Toronto, maybe a little bit but then we saw something out of their defense that really sort of solidified that, hey, maybe they're not that far away. Ottawa, I think, is the most concerned. There is some serious trouble going on there, even beyond the fact that Drew Brown is injured. What is going to become of that team when he's back? Can that offense score enough?
They haven't, and we talked a lot about their receiving core and their ability to put points on the board. It looks early in the season like both Ottawa and Hamilton are going to have to really lean on those offenses to win them games, because I'm not sure the defense is capable of holding teams under 24 points a game, and they're going to need to find ways to score. Bo Levi Mitchell, I have confidence that he's still a capable quarterback in this league. Drew Brown threw for over 400 yards in his first start this season as well. I think there's some potential there for a good season. Stopping the other team right now has to be the priority for both of those teams.
If you're the Ottawa Redblacks, what happened against Montreal, I think, was maybe an over-exaggeration of how difficult things are. They are getting Frankie Griffin back in their linebacking core. That's going to help out a little bit, but they've lost their starting safety. They've had to make a change there. Of course, their starting quarterback wasn't there. If those people were in the game, would it have made that much of a difference? Maybe. Maybe the Red Blacks would have pushed the Alouettes further, but Matthew Schultz looked in over his head, especially in that second half when the Alouettes started to change up their defense.
The Red Blacks were scoreless in the fourth quarter. There was kind of no pushback from them at the end of the game. Matthew Schultz has been in this league for several seasons now. He's had starts for a few different teams. You're right, he did not look comfortable at all in this game against that Montreal defense. We know what the defense of the Alouettes can do to players and offenses as well. They're a pretty tough squad to play against, and if you're not ready to go, things can get away from you.
And speaking of getting away and maybe coming back, Kevin Brown is now back with the Toronto Argonauts after being released after training camp. The Argonauts have brought him back, and I think it's in response to the absolute paltry running attack that the Argonauts have put up in the first two games. And when you're pushing everything on to Nick Arbuckle, he's not a gunslinger. He's not a Bo Levi Mitchell that'll just chuck it all the way down the field. He was for a time in Calgary when everything was thrust upon him. But since then, he has been much more of methodical. I don't see that having a weak running game helps him. Kevin Brown coming back in probably will now alleviate some of that stress.
There was a couple of surprise running back cuts by the Argonauts. Kadeem Carey was the other one that they had sent packing, now picked up by the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And you're right, as much as you look at getting some younger guys in at lower price tags and seeing what they can do, there is something to be said to having that veteran presence. And I agree. I think Kevin Brown coming back into this squad is a bit of a stabilizing factor. And right now they're struggling to find their way until Chad Kelly gets back. They were without him for 9 games last year and kind of kept their head above water at 5-4. But they can't afford to slip too much further, and they need to find a way to turn it around.
And you mentioned in the opening that they don't have to worry too much because they're still tied for second in the East. But you've got to look west as well. Those teams are winning. That means that there's a crossover possibility that comes into play. You can't falter if you're in the East. Everyone thinks, well, 3 of 4 make it. No, not necessarily. Maybe only 2 of 4 make it.
The good news right now is they're still going to get to play every other team in the league. So you can right those wrongs if you make the proper adjustments. And that goes for everybody. As of the end of this coming weekend, the Bombers and Lions will have completed their season series and won't meet again until a potential playoff matchup. A little bit of a weird schedule for 2 teams within the same division to be wrapped up that early, but you do get those opportunities against most teams later on in the season to get that game back.
It is a bit of an anomaly that way. We don't often see that. However, it tells you how difficult scheduling is. Because you've got stadium availability, you've got to make sure that the team isn't traveling for 3 weeks in a row, all these kinds of concerns that you have. And sometimes you get places where that square peg has got to fit in that round hole. And this is where it happened. Back-to-back and you're done. It's a surprise. BC is really up against it to win that season series. Not only have to win in Vancouver, they got to win big.
They do. It was a 2-touchdown loss against the Bombers this past weekend. The Bombers, their schedule this season, they're really going to be kind of the kings of those back-to-back games. They've got back-to-back against BC. We know they have the traditional back-to-back against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. They've also got Calgary in a back-to-back situation, and I believe the Argonauts as well. So an interesting, we know it's always tough to win both ends of a back-to-back, a home and away series, and this will be a real test for the Bombers this season.
Well, and injuries, as we talked about earlier, impact those types of back-to-back games immensely. Nathan Rourke may not be available for the return match. Suddenly you could get 2 games off of that team that you were thinking 50-50 would be okay. That changes the dynamic very quickly. And that's part of the reason why I don't like the back-to-backs, because you've got that one set of circumstances playing out 2 times, where if you've got the gaps, even the Labor Day wraparound games, I'm not a big fan of that. I understand for marketing revenue, it makes a lot of sense.
I'm sure Mike O'Shea will always tell you he wants to go 1-0 every week, but there's probably some other people in that Bomber room that looked at the schedule and thought, if we go 1-1 against the BC Lions to start the season, we're in pretty good shape. To get the win this past week that we'll break down a little bit later with Chris Strevler as the starting quarterback and losing Brady Oliveira in the first drive of the game has to be a pretty happy bunch of Blue Bombers with the outcome of that one. And now they're moving into the second game in BC with the possibility of Nathan Rourke being on the shelf. If he is on the field, not likely to be 100%.
Hi, I'm Dave Naylor, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble podcast.
Opening the week, we'll talk about the game in Winnipeg where the BC Lions seemed to go without Vernon Adams Jr. into sort of a death valley for them, a sellout crowd, and the Blue Bombers, in spite of the fact that Chris Streveler was quarterbacking, everyone thinking that that would really change the dynamics, but Streveler actually wound up playing a pretty good game.
He did, and I think he surprised a lot of people. He only had 2 rushes for 9 yards in this game. We have seen in the past his tendency is to look to the first receiver option. If it's not there, he pulls the ball and runs. I think he did a really good job this week of staying in the pocket, looking at some options, and finding the open man. 15 for 24, 246 yards, 1 interception, but 3 touchdowns, and some really impressive drives, including a 108-yard touchdown drive that started on their own too.
With that 108-yard drive that he marched the team down the field, that was massive. That was sort of like a statement moment. His counterpart, Nathan Rourke, went 12 of 27 for 249 himself. You always sort of talk about if you're 10 yards per reception, then you're doing all right as a quarterback. The more you go, then the better for you, because think about it. If your average is beyond 10 yards, that means every time you chuck and catch a ball, that's a first down. You want that.
You do. Nathan Rourke really struggled early in this game. If it wasn't for a large completion, I believe 49 yards to Aiden Eberhardt late in the second quarter that set up a field goal, he would have had a real abysmal first half. If it wasn't for a 49-yard completion to Aiden Eberhardt late in the first half that led to a touchdown, it would have been a real abysmal half. The other big play, he did complete a 77-yard touchdown pass to Keon Hatcher as well. So those are 2 plays that equal a big chunk of the passing yards for Nathan Rourke. If you look at the rest of the body of work, and yes, I know you want to look at a total, you take away those 2 plays, and he wasn't super effective in finding his receivers.
And you're right about that. You got to learn from these types of situations. For Nathan Rourke and the BC Lions, I kind of thought that the Bombers were in their head before the game started. That just the fact that they were there was sort of like, oh no. You can't be like that. You've got to be the opposite way where, hey, we're here and we're going to make life tough for you at home. The Lions looked intimidated. And this is one of the sort of touch points that Ryan McMaden had really pushed, was that this team has got to become more resilient, get through these tough situations.
We talked at length in the offseason about the players that weren't returning to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers this season, but some new additions really stepped up. Terrell Ford moving to play with his brother in Edmonton left a hole in the defensive secondary. Marquise Bridges has stepped into that role. He did get torched on that Keon Hatcher touchdown, but he also had 2 key interceptions and really came into his own in this one. Trey Vauvel on the kick returns as well. That was a bit of a weakness for the Bombers last year. They signed Peyton Logan from Calgary in the offseason. He is injured. Trey Vauvel came in and did a pretty admirable job. He did bobble 1 kick that led to them starting on their own 2-yard line. But other than that, I think he was really effective, moving the ball, catching it, and going forward and picking up some big return yards.
Winnipeg just never looked threatened in that football game. And granted that the Lions kept pace with them in the third quarter, but they were shut out in the fourth. When Jeremiah Mazzoli came in, he wasn't really effective. He hasn't had a lot of playing time either. Whether he gets a start this week or not, that will be something that will have to be determined by the doctors with Nathan Rourke's situation. Mazzoli just looked a little bit out of sorts, but that's not unusual because if you haven't played much and the rust is there, it's going to catch up to you. He'll, with practice, and he is leading practice right now, he'll get more reps and get more familiar with everything.
Is there any chance that Chase Bryce gets some key playing time this week as well if Nathan Rourke can't go?
It all depends, too, what they feel about the situation with Rourke, because they may dress him and have him as the backup. And in an emergency, then they've got to bring him out there. And Jeremiah Mazzoli will have the lion's share, pardon the pun, of the gameplay. It's all down to the doctors. We don't know on this day what they'll decide that day.
One observation I have is that the BC Lions offensive line needs to be a lot better. If they're going to protect assets like Nathan Rourke, there was pressure on him all night. He was only sacked a couple of times, but he was rushed a lot. There was, as we mentioned earlier, a couple of situations for sure where he was wrapped up and on the way to being sacked, if not for his ability to get the ball off and throw it away. So I think the Bombers, with their defensive scheme, sometimes they're not rushing a lot of guys. And some of these were more of a breakdown in coverage, but they did get enough pressure on Nathan Rourke and later on Jeremiah Mazzoli to make it a long night for both of those quarterbacks.
Second game of the week saw the Montreal Alouettes go into Ottawa to take on the Red Blacks, and Montreal, facing a backup quarterback, having a 5-0 quarterback start for them, Montreal showed that their defense was dominant and their offense showed up as well and took care of business, whipping the Red Blacks 39-18 in front of a good crowd at TD Place, but they went away disappointed with the effort. Matthew Schultz, for whatever reason, just did not look good.
He didn't, and I think a lot of that speaks volumes to that Montreal defense. Darnell Sankey, Tyrese Beverett, Marc-Antoine Dequoy, Sean Oakman had a couple of key plays in there. You can just run down that list of defensive players for the Montreal Alouettes. They continue to lead this Montreal Alouettes team, but the offense, I mean, overall they put 39 points on the board, a pretty big offensive night for the Alouettes.
You could take the offense for 32 because there was one defensive touchdown scored by the Alouettes with Luol Gulak batted into the hands of Wesley Sutton, and he does the rest and goes for the score. 7 points from your defense, 7 points or more from your special teams, let's say. That always helps. And as I said, that was just a huge turning point. That seemed to really deflate the Red Blacks. They felt they were up against it to begin with, and when the Alouettes defense gets going, and one of the things that they talked about during the game, and I really like this, was that the Alouettes give you the same sort of look up front all the time. You just don't know which player is coming after you or if any of them are coming after you. You don't know if it's going to be a 3-person rush, a 4, you're going to bring an outside linebacker, you're going to bring a halfback. You don't know. But every time Schultz went to the line of scrimmage, he looked at them and they looked the same they did the play before.
3 interceptions, as we talked about the importance of that Montreal defense. They find a way to get after it, and whether it's getting the hands up and batting the ball like we saw on that touchdown by Sutton, or just kind of a straight up coverage, being in the right place at the right time interception as well. Montreal just continues to find a way to get it done. Davis Alexander again has a great streak going as a starting quarterback for the Montreal Alouettes. It's starting to look like a pretty wise decision by that Alouettes front office to go with Alexander and set Cody Fajardo loose. 23 of 32 for 344 yards. Again, another solid night for Alexander.
Argonauts draw their biggest home opening crowd since 2016.
But we saw them fall to Vernon Adams and the surprising 2-0 Calgary Stampeders. 29-19 was the final in this one.
And the game started off auspiciously when Reggie Bagleton, just performing a simple block, got thrown to the ground and was done for the night. Now, fortunately for him, his catching streak is alive. He caught one just prior to that, but within the first drive, their top receiver is out of the game. Stampeders don't do anything in that first quarter, but then they sort of get going in the second quarter. A huge play by Adrian Green with an interception. Again, a defensive score that helps get the offense going, and the Stampeders managed to withstand everything that the Argos could put at them, even though the Argos rallied in that fourth quarter. Stampeders came out with the win. Another interesting side note, Vernon Adams Jr., that's the first time he's ever won in Toronto.
And surprisingly, 0 touchdown passes for VA so far in 2 games this season. I don't expect that will last a super long time. We saw Zach Collaros last season struggle to throw touchdown passes early on. Vernon Adams, we know he's a big play guy, and those touchdown passes will come. I thought Jalen Philpott had his best game of his CFL career so far this season. 6 catches for 117 yards. With Bagleton going down, I thought Philpott really was the one that stepped up. Dominic Rhymes had 4 catches as well for 98 yards. So some important plays to replace receiver of the caliber of Reggie Bagleton.
Adams goes 17 of 25 for 301. On the other side, Nick Arbuckle, 31 of 42. He has 2 picks. One goes for a score, and he throws a touchdown pass himself to DeMonte Coxey. Toronto 0-2 to start the season. I had talked to Steve Daniel just prior. How many times has a Grey Cup winner gone winless to start the season? It doesn't happen very often.
I do believe the Argonauts will stick with Nick Arbuckle until Chad Kelly is ready to come back. He is the reigning Grey Cup MVP. The comfort level of having Nick Arbuckle in there versus any of the backup quarterbacks is the best situation for them. They need to start figuring this out and stringing some wins together. It doesn't look like Kelly's going to be ready for Game 3. We don't know if it's going to be Game 4, Game 5, or where he jumps into this lineup, but I'm sure they are eager to get him back.
Final game of Saturday, the second of the doubleheader, saw the Saskatchewan Roughriders go to Hamilton to play the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And much like they did the year before, the Roughriders squeak one out, this time 28-23. Brett Lawther has a tough day, missing a couple of field goals and a point after that keeps the Ticats within reach.
Small sample size and gross overreaction. Is it time for the Rough Riders to look at some other options in the kicking position? We saw Lawther go through this last season as well. He had a couple of games where he really struggled, and then he hit his stride and didn't miss for pretty much the entire second half of the season.
Week 11 against the Alouettes last year, he was 3 of 7. And the Rough Riders lose that game partly on the strength of the 12 points that weren't scored. Didn't cost them in Hamilton. He apologized to the Rider faithful and to his teammates, but nobody on the team went to him and said, "You let us down." And his coach came out and said, "Don't worry about it. Everybody has a bad day. You have yours, we'll be good." And we know that he went 28-29 after that game he played against the Montreal Alouettes in Regina in Week 11. He's good for what he's going to do. He just has every once in a while when the mechanics aren't working the way they're supposed to. And we saw he was missing wildly on a couple of those field goal attempts.
One thing we didn't mention earlier was actually the long snappers. The Montreal Alouettes and Winnipeg Blue Bombers both suffered injuries to their long snappers in this week's action. It looks like Mike Benson in Winnipeg is going to be out for at least another game. They've re-signed somebody that they had cut in training camp. Not the same situation with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, but as we all know, the snapper, the holder, and the kicker all have to be in sync for everything to work out. And I'm sure that at practice this week, that Roughriders special teams unit is really working on nailing everything down.
Stampeders losing their long snapper, Aaron Crawford, to the 6th game as well. He got injured in that game, and he gutted it out. He stuck it out despite the fact that he was injured. Bring in Jason McGugan as his replacement. McGugan, of course, attended camp with the Stampeders, but was let go of as part of their final cuts. And this is one of the interesting things, and it happens in the NFL as well. Don't get too disconsolate when you're cut at the end of training camp. Keep near your phone, because you just don't know. And even you and I had talked about it. Injuries come up, and immediately there's need. And here we go. The Stampeders right away have need.
And we saw that, as we mentioned earlier, with Kadeem Carey, cut by the Argonauts, picked up by the Rough Riders. Early on in the season, when those injuries happen, you've got guys that have been through a camp that are game ready and can jump into the lineup. And it's important to be ready and able to jump to whichever city comes calling.
Now, for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, that fourth quarter was critical. And one of the elements of that fourth quarter was the way that Saskatchewan moved down the field with Keyshawn Johnson, and not that Keyshawn Johnson, against the Hamilton Tiger Cats' Destin Talbert. The Riders picked on Talbert mercilessly. Brent Mawson, who's in his first season with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, their defensive coordinator, changed things up, trying to break up that matchup. But it seemed as though the Riders had figured it out, and they were relentless. And, of course, the touchdown pass was a cover zero. And where we've heard that before, 2023 Grey Cup maybe, Riders went deep and scored on it.
Trevor Harris did a great job of spreading the ball around as well. So, as you mentioned, Keyshawn Johnson, 8 catches for 124 yards. Dale Duncan Bisbee, 5 catches for 59. Sam Emelis, 4 for 37. Mitchell Picton had a couple of catches for 22 yards. Dante Myers went for 40 yards. So you saw not just the opportunity to focus on Keyshawn Johnson for some big plays, but when he wasn't available, Trevor Harris found the next guy and really did a good job of keeping this offense going.
And A.J. Ouellette, who was coming back from a concussion, ran for his longest touchdown or longest play period of 47 yards in that second quarter that helped get the Rough Riders going. Of course, Roland Milligan, who we thought might not play, he started and also got an interception, and he took it to the house. So, again, teams that scored defensive touchdowns all won.
Roland Milligan picking up right where he left off last season. He hasn't missed a beat, and we know he's a dangerous player in that defensive secondary.
Third down.
Kicking off week 3 of the CFL schedule, the Montreal Alouettes are in Edmonton for the Elks home opener. The undefeated Alouettes are a 5.5-point favorite on the road. Can the Elks keep this one close?
It's going to be really tough for them to do so. Edmonton franchise, since 2022, have gone 0-4, 0-5, and 0-7 to start their seasons. You have to go back to 2021 when they went 2-2. They need something out of this game. Whether they keep the Alouettes close, which the games have been very close between these two in recent memory. Montreal's defense, this is a real one of those litmus tests for Trey Ford. How is he going to respond to this? He's seen what Ottawa went through. He's seen what Toronto has gone through. Is that playing in his mind, or is Jordan McSimic saying, look, we've got a way through this, I'll figure it out, and we'll get it done?
If that's the case, they need to cater the offense to what Trey Ford does well, and that's to move the pocket around, get him out of harm's way, and able to find the guys downfield. I do like the Elks to keep this one close. I think the Alouettes will ultimately come out victorious. My best guess is this is the lowest scoring game of the week. The Alouettes will win it by about 3 points, so I do like the Elks plus the 5.5.
I just think the Alouettes are in such a roll right now, it would be tough to go against them. The Elks are not going to lay down. There's so much change in that team, and it's just going to take time for it to gel. I don't care that if they got veteran players, they still have to figure out what each other is doing. You have to get familiar. That's where they're going to stumble. I like the Alouettes to prevail, not in a big scoring game. I think you're over-under. You could be no higher than 40. On Friday night, the Saskatchewan Roughriders are in Toronto to take on the Argonauts. Second straight home date for the Argonauts. Second game in a row that the Roughriders are out east. Roughriders are favored by 2.5 on the road.
That seems like a reasonable point spread based on what we've seen so far this season. The Argonauts need to get things figured out, especially on offense. Nick Arbuckle needs to be the leader of this team like he was in that Grey Cup game a few months ago. The Roughriders, they've got a couple of guys banged up, as do all teams, but that offensive line continues to find a way to stick together, step up, patch the holes, tape your limbs back on, and get back out there. That is what Trevor Harris needs. He's the oldest starting quarterback in the league, and he needs time to throw. He does have one of the quickest releases. You've got to keep him upright. Again, I think this is going to be a close one. I would take the Riders to win outright. If Brett Lothar struggles a little bit again and leaves some points out there, it could be down to a point or two. So I like the Argonauts plus the 2.5.
The Argonauts defense showed a lot against the Calgary Stampeders. They looked like they were starting to come together. The Saskatchewan Roughriders, there's two things about this that concern me. Let's put Lowther aside. Samuel Emelis has got a sore foot. He may not be available. They're also making the second trip back to the east in a week. That doesn't usually go well for a Western team. And think back to all of the crossover games where the Eastern team has hosted the Western team in the semifinal, and maybe the Western team has won. But they go back for the next game, and they get blown out. It takes a lot out of you to move across those time zones, all that time in the air, and you've got humidex in Toronto that you don't see on the prairies. Regina, if it's 28, the humidity's around 20%. Toronto, it's 28, the humidity's around 60 to 70%. It's much different. I don't know that the Roughriders are going to react well to that. I'm kind of thinking I'm going to lean with the Argonauts and take this one. Just not that I don't think the Riders could do it, but the Argonauts, they've got to win somewhere, and Saskatchewan is going to be tired.
Game 3, the first game of the Saturday doubleheader, The Ottawa Redblacks are in Calgary to take on the 2-0 Calgary Stampeders. It looks like the odds makers aren't true believers of the Stamps yet. They are only a 1.5 point favorite at home against Ottawa. What do you see in this one?
Really comes down to whether or not Drew Brown is ready and able to lead the Red Blacks. If he's not, and it's Matthew Schultz again, or do they go as far as Dustin Crum? Matthew Schultz just didn't look right against Montreal. The Calgary Stampeders gutted it out against the Argonauts with the injuries that they were facing. And Bob Slovic has certainly made his presence felt with that Calgary defense. He's been around a long time. He's had lots of experience in the NFL. He's also been a D coordinator with the Alouettes before, so he knows the CFL. That defense is responding well to his tutelage. I just don't see how the Red Blacks, even if their defense does play better, if Lorenzo Malden has a bigger game. And one of the things I'm curious about, you remember the scoring play that James Letcher had? It was Malden who was in the end zone trying to tackle him. What is a defensive end doing 25 yards down the field? Sometimes you can get so creative that you forget what you're doing.
If Drew Brown is healthy and plays in this one, I believe in that Red Blacks offense. We saw him throw for 400 yards in game one. If he's got that in him here again, this one could be a bit of a shootout. I anticipate Vernon Adams throwing for over 300 in this one as well, probably getting his first couple of touchdown passes. But there's always that potential for a Vernon Adams interception at a key time as well. I'm picking the road team with the upset. I think the Red Blacks come in, get things going. The loss of Reggie Bagleton is going to hurt Vernon Adams and that Calgary offense. So if they're going shot for shot, I like the Red Blacks coming out on top in this one.
I'm going to go the opposite way and pick the Stampeders because I think, especially now, they're confident. They're back home, and the Red Blacks are reeling after what happened in Ottawa, losing by 21 points. A 1.5 point spread, I think, is being kind to the Red Blacks. It really is a Drew Brown, are you going to be playing spread? And if he is, yeah, that's a legit spread, and the Red Blacks could upset. But if he's not, Stampeders are going to win this game. Final game of the weekend, the late game on Saturday. It's the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at the BC Lions, the end of that back-to-back series that they have, and also the last time these two play until maybe the playoffs, if that so happens. The Lions are 2.5 point underdogs against the Blue Bombers, and we see Zach Collaros come back onto the field.
An interesting flip in the odds as the Bombers were the home dog last week, pulled off the win. Now going to BC, and the Lions are the home dog by 2.5. I think the Bombers sweep the season series. This is a situation where, yes, they are without Brady Oliveira. They had a pretty capable backup step in there last week with Matthew Peterson. He rolled off 127 yards. The offensive line played well. They've got Dalton Schoen back on that offense. Carrick Wheatfall was a guy I was hoping to be able to pick up in fantasy as a bit of a under-the-radar guy, but he went off in their first game of the season as well. No surprises there. Nick Dembski on the corner route. It was Strevler throwing it this time and not Collaros. Now he's going to get Zach back in there as well. I think the Bombers pull away in this one. It may not be the 2-touchdown win that they had last week. No matter who the quarterback is for the BC Lions, I see the Bombers giving them fits again. I like the Bombers on the road.
It's going to come down to quarterback play for the BC Lions. If Nathan Rourke is healthy enough to go, he's got to put up some numbers. If it's Jeremiah Mazzoli, then he's got to be a steadying influence over that football team. The Lions right away are looking to make changes to try to get through what's happening. At the start of the season, they've already released defensive lineman Trey Crawford. They've got rid of Canadian linebacker Deshaun Stevens. That's telling me that they're worried about that defense, that they're not shutting people down. And that ultimately that was their problem against Winnipeg, was they couldn't stop them. They could score. They could score from anywhere on the field. But when you're having to keep up with that all the time, every time you score, they score, you're not getting ahead.
You're right. I just think that if you're looking at which team is more confident and more comfortable right now, it's clearly the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Yes, they've only had one game so far, but they came out and showed that they are ready to play. They had that awful 0-4 start last season, got all the way to the Grey Cup, so it's got to feel pretty good to get that first win out of the gate, and they're going into BC with a lot of confidence.
I kind of like the Bombers in this one. I think right now the BC Lions are really haven't gotten through what happened right after Labor Day last year. They're still struggling to find an identity. And until they figure this out, the Lions are going to be struggling. Bombers to cover, yes.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble podcast. Audio worth watching.